Hello, Micah Brown. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh, not bad, thanks. I'm looking at my background here. The split screen doesn't really do justice to the kind of spread I've got going on, but I'm not gonna focus on that. We're gonna focus on the
Exactly.
show.
Yeah. It
So
doesn't do justice to the ship you're at the helm of as the captain.
that's right. I just have been told that my new identity as the captain is really working for me.
I,
This
I
is
would agree.
it's just a leftover Halloween costume hat, but it fits my head, you know. All right, so we're just gonna do a little housekeeping here. Take care of some really important business here. Watermark overlay, there it is, right above your head, my friend. If you don't want to be covered by that, we can switch. What do you
No,
think?
I'm good. I'll just try to not put my head right here. That's
Well,
where that's where it shouldn't be. That's where my face shouldn't go. So I'll try not to
now
go right here. Oh, this is tech. Now there's two of me and no you.
this is also an option.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm fine with whatever. I'm not.
This is an option. This once again is an option. Of course, there's also the you know that particular ego trip. We can do one of these. We can do one of these. What's that all about? Now you're interviewing me.
I
Now,
I think. Oh,
now we can both visit New York at the same time. Hang on, where is it? Yeah, there.
ooh.
Now this feels like we're really doing something exciting. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Does Montreal wish
Just
it was New York, or is that just Toronto?
no. I mean,
Shots fired.
in ways probably, but at the same time, I I think there are things to envy and there's things to not. So it's much more affordable to live in Montreal, which is nice.
No kidding. And especially right now for like crazy reasons. I mean, we're watching the city scene because it's stock footage. And the streets don't look like they're that busy, although the things like the markets are like maybe not as happening right now. It's a pretty
Right.
crazy time to be a New Yorker.
Yeah.
And we're back.
Wow, that's a quick trip.
Yeah.
I've barely left my house for the last couple of months, let alone go to New York, which seems to be one of the global epicenters of this pandemic. So that was a real trip.
You were in and out in a minute. All
It
right.
looks nice.
I agree. It did look nice. I have a digital subscription to the New York Times, which means I get their newsletter every day. And I bought it to. You ever run into the thing where people share their articles, and then you've reached your 5 free articles this month or whatever. So I bought the subscription, and it was $8 a month, and I was like, I don't read any of these. And then I tried to cancel, and they asked me if I would be willing to continue for $4 a month. I said yes, but it hasn't changed the fact that I don't. It's just not how I like reading things. Like I already read enough on the computer. I don't go on the website looking for it. But now and then they did like a virtual tour of Brooklyn the other day. Just like they just have so much content. Their stuff is great too. It's like really well put together. But you know, um,
That's sort of the classic thing with any subscription. I find more often than not, this subscription is worth the value. It's like there's enough content to merit it. It's just, do you actually have the time to consume it?
yeah, absolutely. Um, anyhow, Amazing city. But we're not here to talk about New York.
Oh,
We're here to
really?
correct a city I've been to twice. I consider myself something of an authority, but we're not here to talk about that either.
Mhm.
So you're coming to us live from
Montreal, Rosemont, Petit Patrie neighborhood in Montreal, Quebec,
beautiful. How long you been
Canada.
there?
I've lived here. It'll be 5 years this fall,
Hmm.
so 4 years and a bit.
And why do you live there?
That's a good question. I think I moved here sort of out of circumstance, and I knew some people who lived here. Some of them, being family. I have two brothers who live here, so that's really nice. And I had friends who lived here, but also because it's a great city for arts and culture, which I'm interested in. And I was closing out sort of one chapter of my life and figuring out what to do next. And having no real big plan, it was a good idea to move here. Now it sort of ended up, I really enjoy living here for a lot of the reasons I moved here, but understanding more of what it is in a holistic sense, it's sort of like I just lucked into, like, I didn't move here nonchalantly. I had people who were champions of it uh, and sold it to me, but at the same time, I have like a pretty good appreciation for what it is, given all the other places I've visited and seen. Yeah, I really like living here. It's a good city. It's affordable. There's a lot of good art here, and yeah, it's a beautiful spot.
Good. Good to hear. I don't really have an appropriate follow up, but I'm interested in why people do the things they do. So um, I don't have a
So
trend.
like one thing that's very nice about Montreal, just for reference, um, I mean everybody who has friends who sort of move here willy nilly because it's like a cheap place to live from what they hear, and it's like uh, a major city, so you get the benefits of being a major city. If you're into bands, people come and tour through frequently, and there's a real hub and industry here. Um,
And if you're a young person in Canada, like from the East Coast where we come from, it's like really Toronto or Montreal are like the two big cities
yeah, absolutely.
that people end up in.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for myself, like when I moved here, I didn't really have a plan or any job at the time. So I had some savings, and I was sort of like, I'll figure it out when I get there. I had a place to stay with our brothers, and
You were living
that
in a it wasn't quite a room as I
it was
recall.
it was a second living room. It was
Uh huh.
separated by French doors, but
Right.
there was also an opening at the top of it, so it wasn't it wasn't like, yeah, it was a second living room.
The French doors, as I recall, too, were like I mean maybe this is just what French doors are, but like basically entirely windows.
Yeah. There were curtains on them, and I lived there for 3 months, I believe, maybe even only two.
Oh,
Like
really?
maybe we got our place shortly after. But yeah, I had finished school, and I studied engineering, and basically my entire program was like married to the oil and gas world, and I didn't really realize that when I was in school or when I signed up to go there. I
No,
I
because I recall you signed up to go there because you wanted to study engineering, and you can maybe illustrate why. But you had scoped out all the universities, and Memorial offered like the quickest program at the best price.
Well, it wasn't quick. It was actually the longest program, but it
Oh,
was a
was it?
mandatory co-op program. But it was like, it was, yeah, it's super affordable, and you had to work throughout. So like you worked for 20 months at like good engineering student wages. So you were sort of both guaranteed work and experience and all these things. And yeah, my brain is just sort of tuned that way. So when I was finishing high school, um, I I just thought it would be like the thing to pursue. And then I got into it, and they sort of pushed you. So I went to school at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland, and they sort of tried to funnel you into the oil and gas world. And I did work some internships there, but ultimately, it like a classic thing that people would say about internships and maybe jobs and things like that. It's like, you have a good job, or you have a job that you could have some sort of path or future in.
Mhm.
when you like show up to work and you look around and you're sort of like, oh, I one day like to do what this person's doing. Um, but I really realized at some point when I was like working those office jobs for oil companies, I was like, oh, like I don't really want anybody's job. Like I'm
Yeah,
here.
I'm 25 years old, waiting to retire.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it was like people who were working those jobs like had very specific goals, and like I completely empathize with it, and
I'm
I
not
don't.
knocking it for anybody, like if that's their scene, but
Yeah,
I mean,
it.
I agree, it was never mine.
Mm. So then I bumped around a little bit, and coincidentally, so I started to get into like weirder sides of engineering, like product development and things like this that weren't as inherently lucrative, but were more interesting to me. And
Hmm.
I pursued that a little bit. But then when I finished school, the oil industry was going through like basically the price of oil just tanked, and all of my peers who at one time were like hoping to get these jobs with oil companies were now like competing for all of the stuff that I was doing. So it was just a tough scene to try to like start your career or whatever. And I didn't even really know if I wanted to do that. I just sort of grinded pretty hard for a couple of years. So then, yeah, I decided it was time to get out of Dodge. I absolutely love St. John's, Newfoundland. I love living there. I love the people there. I have a lot of close friends who still live there. I try to visit as often as I can. But there's also another part where I was like 23 years old, and I was like, I haven't seen any of my favorite bands live, and I like there's so few people who work in music or just there. I know there's like another world out there, and I'd like to try to see it.
Yeah, you would not have been likely to see them live anytime soon where you were living either.
Yeah.
And it just being the geographical reality. I know the one time that I went to Newfoundland was during La Vanya, and I remember people talking about that, how it just is hard for local bands there to tour because to get off the island it's so far and so expensive, and so you really, and people do it, and it's the reason there's such a strong local music culture. Um, I do think like isolation, if you want to call it that, breeds people make their own fun. And also, what I was really struck by when I went there is like everybody just kind of hangs out. Nobody's in a hurry to get to the next thing the way that I was used to, or like this thing is over and everybody's like going their separate ways. During, and maybe it was just the festival, but it was more like this thing's over and we're all just gonna like chill here because there's no place we have to be, um, which I thought was kind of cool. But anyhow, I know people say historically bands from like the Maritimes would say, if you can make it to Newfoundland, it's a great place to play. They really love music, they support it, and people are just excited that somebody came to play for them, and so people turn out. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that would still be the case. I suspect there's probably still some truth to it. There certainly was seemed to be a pretty healthy live music scene there, but it is a challenge. Like it's hard to make money anyway as an indie band, and I mean, as we well know, major artists when they tour through, they consider Eastern Canada. You know, the classic thing is like you hear that your favorite band is touring Eastern Canada, and that means they're going to Montreal, Quebec. And you're
Yes.
like, it's
Yeah.
still 25 hours from my head. No, it's not 25 hours. I could be there in probably 9 hours from here, but you know, it's not your town.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I had an absolutely phenomenal experience the 5 years that I was there, and I think smaller cities, in a lot of ways, really can support and nourish uh, artists who like want to create. And I think there's a lot of spaces availed, and I think people work really hard to make good things. Um, I just also, I think at the time was very conscientious of the global, like what the global music scene was, and I just like I just didn't know, like I didn't know what it was like to be in a band, like the bands that I like, because I like a lot of sort of DIY and scrappy bands even more at that time than I do now. um, and I just didn't know what that actually meant. Like I didn't know what it actually was. Like I had some facsimile of it that existed in my sphere, and
What do you
every
mean by
once in a
that? You
blue
didn't
moon.
know what it actually was.
Well, um, so you would see, because we had access to the internet, you'd see things like different venues in more major cities that were hosting these bands all the time, and what that would be, and sort of, oh, if I lived in this city, like every week I would be able to see a band that I thought was really cool from uh, halfway across the continent. Um, and there's like a whole thing to it, and there's people who work at these venues who cater for these touring bands, and there's people who book these shows, and there's people who play in a million different touring bands and just like are on tour all the time. And obviously this is all on pause right now, and all these people are going through a particularly hard time. But as a 23-year-old, I just felt like I knew and had a really good grasp of what was going, or like what was happening in Newfoundland. And even too, like I had carved out a pretty good niche for myself, and I could start a new thing and probably get 40 to 50 people to a gig. Because at the time I was doing a lot, and I was recording a lot of bands and playing in a lot of bands. And so it was really hard to leave like that comfort. But also, like, I wanted to know, like, there's only, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong and they hear this, but it's like there's not like commercial recording studios in Newfoundland. Like
Right.
there are spaces that are professional recording studios, but they're typically like associated with some larger entity. And there are people who own their own project studios, which are commercial, in some extent. But there's not like there's like nobody had a Neve console in Newfoundland.
Right. Yeah. Nobody was just a sustainable studio for hire in the way that, and you know, those places. I don't know what the scene is there. Is seen as like there. I know certainly in Halifax, as recording has become more accessible to people, those places just shut down. Like the
Yeah.
spot where we used to hang out, Common Ground, which had been, it was called like Solar Audio or something, and like Anne Marie and Rita McNeil had recorded there, and Meatloaf had done part of an album there. That was like the big kind of claim to fame. But it was like one of these classic studios where there's an AOT drum kit, a giant live room. Also, my phone is getting crazy. I know. I was like, my headphones buzzing. Um, and you know, like you go and sit in the control room, and it's like being on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, and they've got all the outboard gear. And when you go up, this was already in phase 2 of the studio, because you would go in the building, you have to get buzzed in, you go up the stairs, and there was a receptionist booth right there, which was empty. There was never anybody working in it the entire time that I've been there. Like that part of it was already over, and the space just became unsustainable, and they had to pull the plug. And now it's no longer a studio.
Yeah.
It's in the Long
Yeah.
and McQuaid building, and they use it for the attic sale.
Yeah. I mean, I think those places are in a lot of ways becoming dinosaurs even here. And I think it's really hard to sustain because you can do so much at home or with limited means.
Yeah,
And
and that has affected, I think, the way that people consume music too, to the point where um, music that's made in the box is more like, let's say, internet ready. And over the course of a couple of decades, people's listening habits adjust. And now, my point is, you don't need what a giant studio can do in order to make um, commercially successful music. And you also, like, commercially successful is different than it used to be too. Like, the goal is different.
yeah, no, absolutely. The entire thing has shifted. But I think for my own interests, uh, I just like wanted to see it, you know?
Definitely, especially as a young
Um,
man, like, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you just have like an extreme curiosity, and it's sort of like, what is, yeah, what I just wanted to see what it was all about and take it all in, and so I got to do a lot of things when I moved here, and I've had some experiences I'm super grateful for, and I I I I don't want to. It's almost like a little bit morbid to say I've done what I've wanted to do, and I don't think that's the case. But
Why is
there's
that
definitely
morbid?
because then it's sort of like, oh, what's next? Is it done?
Is it
Like is
over?
the pursuit? Yeah,
Well, now our brother James had a quip that I quite liked. He went to Europe last year, and he tweeted or something that he has reached the final stage of living in Montreal, which is wanting to move to Berlin.
yeah, totally. It's a great city. Berlin's amazing.
I've never been. I've been
Oh
to
yeah,
Cologne, Kiln. I can't pronounce it correctly.
yeah, yeah. I've only been for a minute, but it was we were I was there on tour
Tell our listeners,
and
Micah Brown, why were you in Berlin? What were you doing there?
uh, I was on tour. I was playing from 2017 until some point in 2019. I was playing live in the band Fog Lake. So I was doing a lot of that and doing some touring and stuff like this. So yeah, we were on tour. We were doing like a 30-day Euro tour. Um, as support for the great band Foxing from St. Louis, Missouri, and yeah, it was great. But it was a very packed tour. I think we had like 25 shows in 28 days, and then on a day off, the drummer had a project that booked a show in London, so we played another show. So we did 26 and 28.
What
So
was it? A
it
solo
was
show for
packed.
him?
Yeah, it was, but then we backed him up on a couple songs. That was actually my first set ever playing drums live.
Cool. That must have been it.
Yeah.
Like, that must have been crazy.
Yeah, it was like at a dive and there was maybe 20 people there. Um,
What was it
but
called?
it
What was the
was
venue called?
it was it was it was almost like steampunky themed. I want to say it was like the Churchill Arms or something like this. I remember the name just being like, oh, it is it poking fun at like a traditional name or something like this, because it was definitely like run by hip punky sort of like vegan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but over
it
there,
was like vegan food menu. Yeah.
right? like it could be poking fun at, or it could just be like a pub that's been open for 200 years and this is what they do there now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We went to
So
a place
that.
called, sorry?
Oh, I was just gonna say it was a cool experience, and it was yeah, it was a great place and very generous people.
Cool. Yeah, we went to a place called the Churchill Arms, which, for those who don't know, there's also a like classic English pub style spot called the Churchill Arms in Charlottetown, PEI, which is where we are both. We're not from Charlottetown, but Prince Edward Island. And um, anyhow, yeah, we went to the spot in London on a recommendation, and you walk in, and it is a pub, and there's like all kinds of like British memorabilia on the walls, but it's also a Thai restaurant, which was
Okay.
like totally weird.
Yeah. You got to respect a good hodgepodge.
You do, yeah, you do indeed. All right, so yeah, you moved to Montreal to live the big city life. I mean, I moved to Halifax for similar reasons. I think I thought it was a bigger city than it is before I moved there, but I think that's also kind of common. I was talking recently to a friend who had moved here after being in Toronto for a decade, and they're saying similar things. Which, like, you think it's a huge city when you move there, but then, especially once you get involved in some kind of niche community, like if you have any interest and you find the other people who share that interest, it's like it becomes real small in a hurry.
Yeah, there's like really about, especially if it's gets particularly niche, it's like there's about 20 to 25 people, and if you include all peripheral people, it's like 100.
Yeah, right. And in a city where the population is just that big, there's like enough of a concentration of those people that it can actually exist, which is, it's part of the reason, I guess, for when people move to the city to pursue those things. But I think it's like if you are a country bumpkin, like your ideas are that like maybe the thing is bigger. Jazz music, for instance, we went to the Village Vanguard in New York, and it's tiny. It's like a tiny club, and it's legendary. Everyone has played there. But how popular is jazz?
Yeah.
It's like popular enough. They'll do a couple of set, but like the capacity of that place would be, I would say, like, I want to say we saw a sign, it was like 118 or something. It was like less than 150 people.
Mhm.
And two
Well,
shows a night, 7 nights a week, whatever. Maybe they'll do matinees on the weekends. Like, you can make money in a place like that. I'm sure the rent is astronomical. Um, but niche communities.
well, that was one thing about even living here was there are there's a lot of music that has considerable draw, and I'm like really surprised that they like so there's all tiers of venues in a city the size of Montreal, and they all book shows consistently. You have small clubs, you know, 50 to 100, like 50 to 100 cat dives, small spaces, and then you have bigger spaces, 300 cap, you have the 500 2000, and then you have like there's one or two 2000 cap rooms, and then there's like the hockey rink, right? So it's interesting to see who plays at the medium, the 500 cap rooms consistently, but also one thing that really surprised me, just to bring it back to your point about a legendary venue, and it's a 120 cap. Just yeah, going to spaces and maybe somebody's main band isn't playing, but they're playing with some other project, and it's somebody who you're like, oh yeah, like I I know you played sold out shows at the 500 cap room in this place, but you're playing with somebody else, and tonight you're at the bar that I play shows at. Um,
Wait, you're
and
talking about a band member, or this artist is playing as
no,
part of a
no, like a
different group?
band member or
A different,
somebody or some band that's part of a scene that's
dude.
sort of like
I
one of their
saw.
lesser known or newer projects.
Yep,
Yeah.
I saw both of the guitar players from the Tragically Hip at Pepper's Pub in St. John in like 2015 or something. I think I paid $10 because it was Paul Langlois, the rhythm guitarist, had put out a solo album, and so he was doing his East Coast tour, and they played at Pepper's Pub in St. John. But it was crazy because like if those two guys had been playing with the Tragically Hip, they would have been playing at the hockey arena.
Totally.
But as this band, they're at Peppers just grinding it out.
Yeah, and that's not an experience that's like localized to cities the size of Montreal, but I think I just get exposed to it more frequently.
I bet.
Um, and it was like an important thing to see.
Why do you say that? An important thing to see.
Uh, because if you don't really, if you can't like, if you haven't consumed enough and experienced enough, then maybe it's hard to contextualize what it actually is to be a performer.
What do you mean, like what it is, what the lifestyle is, or what the job entails, or can you expand
What
on
what
that?
what the job? Well, both what the job entails, but also like what the spaces are,
Uh
and
huh.
and what different spaces serve. Because um, like so living in a place like St. John's, Newfoundland, you would play the same venues that the people who come to town play, but
Because there's only so many venues.
because there's only so many venues, and it's and but it's like when somebody comes to town, it's such an experience. Whereas here, I could go to the same place 3 nights in a week, and half of the like I could go and see my friend's band, and it will be an absolutely packed house. And then the next day, I can go see a band that like had a good Pitchfork review, and it has half the capacity, and they're
Yeah,
both playing the same dive bar. And I didn't realize that that's actually what it is,
totally.
because there's so much like like there's smoke and mirrors in the internet and all this stuff, and I'm like that band might play their hometown and play like book out a 500 cap room. It's not that's not to be like, oh, I can't believe you didn't do better at this bar. It's just like I just didn't really know what it was to actually um be on tour even when you had a bit of buzz around your band.
Yeah, well, this is. I remember one night playing at the Capitol in Fredericton, and I hope I'm not um, telling tales out of school or whatever the phrase is, but I remember like living in Halifax and kind of watching the Bills there and being like, man, that place is such a cool venue. And they're like, people are so lucky because bands that tour through and go to Halifax for Pop Explosion will play Fredericton on the way through. So they've got, highlights of Pop Explosion happening all week for lower ticket prices. I was thinking people in Fredericton are so lucky. I remember talking to the guys who booked the bar one night and being like, yeah, it's like through the week is tough. Like we try, we bring people in, but if you don't have a local draw, like, and I will not name the band that was used as an example, but it's like Polaris long list, maybe even Polaris short list, doesn't mean much in Fredericton on a Tuesday night. Like, it's good for 20 people.
Totally.
But especially if there's other stuff going on all week, it's a small town. People are not going to be there 5 nights a week, so they're choosing what they want to do.
Yeah, no, completely. I remember we played Fredericton one time, and we got booked for some festival, and it was us and this other artist. This is the Fog Lake, and it was us with this other artist, Helena Delan, she's done really great and cool stuff. And Erin has like a good internet following, and she had done some really incredible stuff. And we played the Capitol to like 10 people, and down the road, but we didn't know it, but it was like down the road there was some show, and it was like you know the band that everybody in town is like, it's like the the young uh pop-in band who everybody is friends with is playing down the road at the bookstore, and it's crammed, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely slammed, and it's like not to like to our horn or anything, but it was like this was after I'd come back from touring with Aaron and being in um like Vienna and having people come up to the merch table and be like, I love this band so much, I've been listening to you for X amount of years, and like that, like being in a different country halfway across the world and being able to sell $200 in merch that night, uh, and which I'm not saying it's a huge like crazy accomplishment, but then it's like then also playing in Fredericton and like nobody comes to your show because everybody's friend is down the road.
Hmm. But also probably similarly, like you said, that was in Vienna.
Yeah,
What's the population of Vienna? I don't know. I'm just
yeah,
off the
yeah, yeah.
top of my head.
I have
Like
no idea.
percentage wise of who lives in the. I'm like looking it up on my phone here now. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
a
yeah,
thing that struck me the first time I took a trip, even just down the East Coast. Like you cross the border into the U.S. and all of a sudden, there's like some driving through Maine, but then you start hitting cities, and it's like uh, Portland, then like Portsmouth, which I don't think is that big in New Hampshire. I don't know what the big kind of city in New Hampshire would be, but then you start hitting like uh, Boston, like
yeah,
Hartford, Connecticut, New York City, Philadelphia, and they're just one after the other, bang, 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 bang.
yeah,
And it's like compared to being out here where you've got, Halifax HRM population is 500,000, but everywhere else it's like under 100,000, I think, or it would be close to. I don't know what Moncton's
yeah.
population is. We're 70,000
It's
here.
yeah. I
You
think
know,
yeah. If
for
you
a
take
touring
everything,
band, go for it.
yeah. Well, if you no, but you're absolutely right in that if you're in a bigger place, and especially too like the band that we were opening up for, I think it was just a double whammy for anyone who was interested in that kind of music. Um, so it was, yeah, that definitely helped us out a lot. Um, yeah, I just think uh, it is so shows at the end of the day, especially in smaller towns, they're social gatherings. And if you went and hung out with your friends all weekend because they like had a good bill of bands, like good bands that everybody knows and they know people are going to be there, and that's your opportunity to have a social experience, then that will sort of always win on a smaller scale unless you have like legitimate large draw and you have a promoter who's like pushing ticket sales.
Totally. And exactly, like, especially if you're in a place where the culture is not necessarily like, let's go and take a chance on some band.
Yeah.
Where it's like, did anybody turn out for your show?
No, no,
Like zero
no.
people?
Well, we were part of a festival. It was like
Okay.
some sort of folk festival. It was a bit of a weird fit.
Was the
And
other show also part of the festival?
no.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So it was yeah, and it was like honestly, if I was in town, I would have probably ended up at the other show. Like
Yeah,
I'm not
because
saying
that's
that
where
I
everybody's going. And even if this is the tough thing, because I would have always been the guy who's like, well, no, this band sounds interesting. Let's go to this. But none of my friends want to. And then so you wind up, it's like, well, do I hang out with my friends or do I go do this thing that I'm kind of interested in? And depending on the night, like me too, like you might just go where everybody else is, especially if it's like, well, we can go to this show. We know these guys. It's like, going to be rocking. If it's part of a
yeah.
festival, you were also not the only other show in town. So it's like you're just, at a certain point, you're just throwing something at the dartboard. That's one of the things of like you kind of get spoiled playing festivals because I shouldn't even say it. I don't want to pay to get into a festival ever, and I do want to have like a wristband if it's a multi-venue festival.
Yeah,
It's not that I think I'm above it. It just is more like, wow, you couldn't get you couldn't get a gig at this one, huh? You know, it's like it's like that kind of psychology. But I
yeah,
also don't want to be tied to one venue or show. Um, and but what I had to do is like let go of, you're just not going to see everything. And sometimes there have been nights where I've ended up at not at all, like I've been like I want to see this, and then I end up missing it, and then I ended up at some other show that is like a local band and not what I planned on doing, and had a great time.
yeah, absolutely. I think for myself now, like living in a place where most of the time you're completely overwhelmed by how much there is going on. I've really had to accept that I'm not going to see everything, and also too, like I'm just a person. Like I don't know. I might be tired. I might be getting sick. Like I might not feel social. I might be trying to work on my own stuff. Like I might. Who knows? Like I have to work. Like that.
Yeah, man.
I I can't like I need to pick and choose. So I think this is one thing that I don't know. I didn't really appreciate as much, but a lot of artists, a lot of performers will talk about like, well, people decided to be entertained by me, and maybe they had to get a babysitter, maybe they had to do this, and you sacrifice a lot to get to a show, sacrifice a lot depending on your situation, but just like being really respectful of people's time and what that means. And I like when I was a little bit younger, now that I'm old, but when you're 19 years old, that sort of doesn't really mean much to you because you're just like, oh, it's great. But when
You're
you
finally
start to,
out. You finally get to do your own thing.
yeah, 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 and two, like the thought of going to a rock show is like the most fun thing in the world, and like you want to do nothing but, I don't know, go out and have fun. But now, having been working 40 plus hours a week for a couple of years, uh, I definitely appreciate that a little bit more. Where
Yeah,
it's
you
like, yeah,
you get it. Also, just like you do enough of it, and at a certain point, you're just like, "Ugh, I've seen so many bands.
yeah, and I don't
you,
really like crowds. Like,
I've realized that too. I mean, it's another reason too why I would rather play than just attend as a fan, because I like having the backstage spot to get away. I like having something to do.
yeah,
I mean, it's Saturday night and I'm doing this, Not that there are a whole lot of options at the moment, but I like it was made most stark for me. And speaking of local bands too, Christmas before last, I didn't make it to this year's, but Grand Theft Bus played a show at Pepper's Pub, and it was like a reunion show. I hadn't seen them in a few years, and I thought, cool, I'll pop in, and it was rammed. So I showed up, paid my $10 at the door, or whatever it was, walked in. I'm bumping into people. I can't really move without bumping into people. I'm in some like there's nowhere I can stand that I'm not in someone's way because it's just a crowd. There's no like path for people to move through. So after about 10 or 15 minutes of this, I'm like, yeah, wow, good for these guys. Like they sound great. The crowd is super into it. And the only spot in this room where I would feel comfortable is on stage, and I'm not going to get up there, so I'm just going to leave.
yeah,
And that's what I did.
yeah, yeah. No, I can completely relate. Not. that I would have felt comfortable on this stage at all. But I Anderson .Paak played Jazz Fest free a couple years ago, and their free shows are all in the middle of downtown on a huge.
I've
Uh,
never seen one, but we played Bar Saint Laurent 2, which no longer exists, the same night that Stevie Wonder did that one year.
oh wow,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I
like
was like, let's cancel our show and go see Stevie, but the my bandmates had different ideas.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like the wrong ideas, but
Oh,
no. But 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 yeah, it was like it was absolutely amazing, and he's an incredible performer, obviously. But at the same time, like I was in a crowd of 20,000 people, and I just like I just don't love it, and I'm sort of
yeah,
standing there, and it's like when if I really want to leave, it's going to be an ordeal. Like I can't get out of here in any less than 15 minutes. Like just to walk through this crowd is going to take 15 minutes. Um, and I don't love that. Uh,
but
so
yeah,
it's a necessary evil of like what it is to be a performer and be successful on that level. But it's like I don't know. I don't particularly love it. Maybe that's like it's super greedy of me. Like, but
well, yeah, I mean, I think it is a different thing. I read a book by it's like a motivational book by a football player last fall. But one of his ideas really resonated with me, which was be a player, not a fan. He's like, when I was in the NFL, he's like, I don't watch the Super Bowl because that event is for fans.
right.
Um, when I was in the NFL, I would be jealous because I would go into the game and I would see these dudes out like having the tailgate parties and like I'm like trying to see where my camera is because I'm flipped backwards. Um, he's like, man, I wish I was just hanging out, drinking beer and watching the game this afternoon. I've been eating healthy food. I've been like getting warmed up. I got to go out here. I'm working. Everybody else is having a good time, but he's like, that's the cost of it. But he really made that distinction between, once you're a player, you also no longer look up to other players. You are colleagues, which is something I still tend to be a fan. But I found that a really interesting kind of mindset shift. And I would say Prince also, I got that book. It was supposed to be his autobiography, but it wound up being kind of something else, The Beautiful Ones. Um, and he said a similar thing, which was once he decided to go pro, it was a different kind of relationship, even between with the people that he really looked up to, where it was no longer about like wow you're amazing, but it's more like we are doing the same thing. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I got a text here, and so let's let's just address some comments here. So I got
Oh
a
yeah, for sure.
check your comments, bro. Um, do you guys remember a PEI band called English Words? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Nay, Smothered in Hugs. Actually, I remember that. St. John is bigger than 100,000, isn't it? I would say surrounding areas, yes. St. John proper, no. Like the uptown kind of. I wouldn't even say uptown, but my understanding is it's like 70,000 ish. But if you include like it's like HRM. How far out do you want to go? You start
Mm.
including Rothsay,
Yeah, and aside, we were talking about New York
Katy.
last night, and I
Yeah,
didn't even realize Newark Airport was in New Jersey until like whatever a day or two ago.
Newark, New Jersey, my friend.
Yeah, but just in pop culture, I've heard so much reference to like, oh yeah, we flow into Newark in reference to
Right.
like going to New York City.
But this is
Yeah.
the thing, and like it's just across the bridge. And even like, so my first time going to New York, we drove. Gavin and I
Mhm.
drove. Gavin McLean, my old bass player, bandmate. Um, and we had like our data turned off on our phones because we didn't want to get like hit with like crazy roaming charges or whatever. You just don't know, right? But it was like take exit 4, whatever the number is. Like I'm making up that number, or take exit number
Yeah.
126. And so we take the exit, and we're like driving down, and we're like, this feels kind of like like smallish town. Like, is this New York City? And we like pull over and go into a Wendy's, and I turn my phone on and I call Adam, who's in like Brooklyn recording, and he's like, no, that's you're not in the right place. And anyway, now that I've got my data on, I check, and we're still in Connecticut. Like we were so thick in city traffic, we were like, well, that's the number, and we've been like, stopped on the highway, so this must be New York, but it wasn't. Just the traffic for New York City extends into the Connecticut highway.
Yeah, I remember. So last night I brought up this New York Newark thing, and Josh, my friend Josh, who uh, plays in
Shouts
a band
out the
that tours a
captain.
lot.
Captain endorses Landshark Lager.
Oh, Landshark.
Thanks to Jeff
But
Smith for getting me out of this.
he was talking about when they were playing in a show in New York, and how they had to like get back into the city. They had to detour and go to New Jersey because it was just like quicker.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's just whatever. However, they were driving, as they were like trying to navigate driving around New York, it took them through New Jersey, and it's like they didn't know they crossed state lines.
Yeah, right. Because you don't, and because the states are smaller and there's more of them, and they're just jammed together. Like
Yeah.
here, to get from province to province, you got to drive for a while. Like on the drive down the East Coast, you're in New Hampshire for like a half hour. Like you just kind of hit the corner
Right.
of it. All right, I'm like now my attention is like divided now.
Oh yeah. I'm just
Uh,
seeing this comment on the chat.
that's
Yeah,
what I'm
English
checking
words.
out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the singles were amazing, and yeah, just really good craftsmanship from what I can remember.
Hmm.
Uh,
This is
it's
what,
not uncommon for bands to not get a record out.
yeah, such a great band, but a classic East Coast story, and that things kind of pooped out before they got to a real album release. Well, it's a challenge with now that the tools are available, the internet is available. We're here.
Mm.
We're doing something. Um, you can do your own thing, but you've got to be organized in a way that most bands are not. And maybe that's just
Yeah.
true of success regardless. But from stories I've read, research, it's like you have to be really kind of no holds barred to committed to success if you really, I think, want to make it doing anything. But
Mm.
it's easier for things to, for instance, Glory Glory, Man United, never developed a live show until probably the last 2 years of our 10 years as a band. Because for the first 8, um, it wasn't necessary.
Right.
It was important. People told us it was important. We still didn't do it, but it wasn't necessary. And the difference would be if you were in a place like perhaps Montreal, I've never lived there, perhaps Toronto, but a bigger center, and you are opening for well established bands, and you're losing those gigs to people who really have it together, then there's an incentive to really like work on your stage show or whatever it is, whatever your particular missing link is. Um, but if you're, or just what, like I remember Joel Plaskett Emergency. Not I. He put out that 44 album. I like, God, I do not have the time. But I remember seeing him at the Horseshoe Tavern during North by Northeast in Toronto, and thinking like I left because Spoon were playing down at Young Dundas Square, and I didn't really know Spoon, but I knew that they were like a band that I had heard about. So I went down to see him, but I also was like, well, Joel Plaskett, he's like an East Coast guy, like nobody will care about him in Toronto. Got back to the bar and it was packed, and I had to wait in line, and I had my, my trusty festival wristband. So I make it into the bar, and he destroyed the place. The show was so good. And I would even say it's like, I don't know if I was like that into a single song, but it wasn't about like, this song is like well crafted and we performed it correctly. Like, it wasn't about that. It was just a killer show. The band was so good. There was like, it was super improvisational, which I love. But obviously, like, there were, like arranged parts, but also like improvised parts. It was super live, and yeah, they just like ripped the place apart. And I remember, because it's a festival, then there was just like 4-piece folk band that played after them, and everyone left, and they just could not. There was nothing they could do. They were
Yeah.
a band that was just figuring it out, like 4 guys with probably 2 acoustic guitars, a bass, and like a mandolin or a banjo or something. No drummer, and they were fine. But but after what that crowd had just witnessed, and also come for, like, there is a celebrity factor for sure, but there just this like, there was no way. They lost the crowd, and it sucked for them. Sucked for them being billed after these guys. And there you go. Joel Plaskett, lifelong Dartmouth resident. So what am I talking about? Crush, like, killed the stage in Toronto. But I think the difference in that case is like, you gotta want to build it, but the incentive also needs to be there, because I would also say, from having sat on factor juries, again, not like, to go into specifics on anyone's case, but people, if there's a label nearby, some band that's just got an EP out on Bandcamp getting signed is not so much of a stretch. Whereas, like, if my band from Halifax got signed to a label out of Toronto, that would have been a big deal. But
Yeah.
if you're a local band getting signed to a local label, like, whatever. But
Yeah.
the bigger venues and the bigger promoters are right next door.
Yeah, totally. And they get those sort of opportunities to open up in 500 cap rooms, and they'll get and and developing bands around here will get those opportunities. Probably, I mean, if you're like really hitting a stride, you might get that opportunity 5 or 6 times a year.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
every other month, you might get that slot.
Whereas here in St. John, we don't have a 500 cap room. Like, we do have one, the Kent Theater, but you've got to rent it and put on and promote the show yourself. It's not like a, an every night or even every week or every month probably venue.
Yeah, yeah. So I think uh, it's sort of like a pressure makes diamonds type of scenario,
Mm-hmm.
where when people are given the opportunity, they'll sort of hone in on it a little bit. But
Yeah,
I don't even think that's necessarily what makes, like, it's like there's a lot of really good bands that exist outside of that. I just think it forces people to address entertainment.
yeah, because I would say the flip side of it is, like, we have played with a lot of bad bands in Toronto, a lot of bad local bands who were just like totally clueless, and the reason that I never, like, it never seemed important to me to move there as a younger person was that bands that come out here from there definitely had like that entertainment side of things together, but the music didn't really ever connect. Like, more
Right.
often than not, it was a band who had their kind of showbiz hustle together, but there was nothing there. Or not. I shouldn't say nothing, because people do it because there's no other reason to make music other than you're like sincere about it. But it didn't connect on an emotional level more than what was being made locally.
Well, and even too, I uh this is gonna sound grim, but if you're looking like for an emotional connection and somebody just clearly really wants to be on stage and they want to be a performer, then that can be really disingenuous.
Oh,
Be-
100%.
because it's sort of like it's like, okay, I get it, like you want to do this thing, and especially if they're like like if they aren't like blow away technically skilled, um and you don't really understand where the work is coming from, then it can seem really strange. And it's sort of like, I can tell you put so much time into this, but at like its very core, I need something to drive and inform what I make in a certain way, in a certain frame, and I don't get that, because to me it feels like your goal is to like is to like play, but there's not really like something behind it that you're hoping to actually connect with people. You just like want to be entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. Or like you may not even want to be entertaining. You may just want people to think that you're fabulous.
Right. Yeah.
Like I've certainly,
Which I don't even think that's like I don't know. Like that's not like a terrible pursuit. It's just like it's not going to make me stick around.
no, it's
Um
not enough.
Yeah, but if that band might be the perfect band to play like the boardwalk on a Saturday for a weekly show thing that the city's putting on. Like they might be the go-to every time for something like that, because because there's a confidence in their ability to like deliver something consistent. And yeah, but if you are distinctively, if you differentiated yourself a bit of a pullback as a player versus just a fan, then that can, if that's not the type of game that you're interested in playing, then it's sort of like it won't mean anything to you.
No, it can be a bummer.
Yeah,
Um,
and also too, when you know how the sausage is made and you sort of like can picture how they, because one thing that I sort of like about certain, like I think one thing that can attract me to an artist and like becoming a fan of them is I really buy into their process.
mhm.
And so I like people who like, I really like recording records. That's like first and foremost. Like I like playing shows, but honestly it's so second. It's so like and and because I just think I can deliver something better on a record, and I like stewing on it, and I like the process of making a record, and I really really enjoy that.
It's funny. I'm the opposite.
Yeah, well, and that's like, and like I appreciate performance, don't get me wrong, but I just like, most of the artists that I like tend to be people who are sort of geared towards making things in the ways that I do it. Like I like people who focus on making records. Those are typically the artists whose work I consume the most.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it also depends it depends on how you consume. Like I would say, I spend more time listening to recordings than I do watching people's live shows. But for me, it's something that's become very apparent, even in just like working on this track for your compilation that you're putting out. I'm aware of my own limitations and I don't really care. Like, I understand how the gear works enough to get something down, but it's more important to me that it just has energy and I can like get the thing done. And I know that a better engineer could do a better job, but I don't it's not important enough to me um, that I spend time developing those skills, and it's not. Um, I don't care enough about my own sound quality to do it either. It's like because I think ultimately, like your interest feeds what you do with it. Where I know, like I'm not really a hi-fi guy. I like stuff that's loose and has energy, and so I'm um, when working on my own stuff, I will. I'm always like down to learn the next thing, but I don't ever care about being like 5 steps ahead of where I am. If that makes sense. As long as long as I know enough to get the thing done.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, especially the personal pursuit of music, because I think if you have any interests in doing this long term, you need to be able to differentiate when you're trying to have some sort of commercial aspect to what you're doing and when you're not, because
Yeah,
that'll sort of save your sanity.
totally. And yeah, right, exactly. So for me in that case, it's like um, if I want to be commercially viable, I need someone else to record me. Like really, I can get things to a certain point on my own, or I need to find people who like kind of lo-fi stuff, and I can get stuff sounding okay, but it's like always better when somebody who has more knowledge does it.
Well, even too though, I think like just sort of zooming in a little bit on project by project basis and really trying to capture how much effort any given step merits is like that will also save your sanity. Just coming from a place for myself, doing like some freelance audio work for people for the last probably 5 to 7 ish years, when I really started doing it and people started paying me money for it, I really took everything that I did very seriously in like an emotional sense.
Yeah, I
Um,
bet.
and that was almost a bit of a mistake because I would be more serious about projects than bands, but I couldn't read the room that people wanted to just like they didn't have an like if they're hiring me, they don't have enough money to go for like the truly commercial experience, or they're not really interested in that either, but they want something that they'll be happy like or that they feel like it's better than what they could have done or something like this. So what it can come down to sometimes is like yeah, just really assessing what the goal of any project is and treating it accordingly as far as like the commercialization of it goes. Um, Maybe that's like a really boring sort of business thing to say, but it's like if somebody hires me to do something, I treat them a very certain way, like the way that I would want to be treated. But also, I try to like really now like I try to do a good job and feel happy about it, but I also try to specifically like deliver a service and be fair to like both them and me, because I could just burn all of my free time working on something that like ultimately they're not going to work to promote or do anything. So it's just sort of time in a hole, and I have things I want to do.
Yeah, it's
So
one thing if you're being
so
paid
I,
a lot for it, but even
yeah.
still, even if you are being paid a lot for something that's ultimately not worth it, you're just getting paid and looking for a way out still.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I guess that's just to say like I think there's so many things and ways that you can approach music, and there's so many people who do and approach it in different ways, and some of them are with commercial intent and some of them aren't. But really honing in on what you like, and also like if you choose to make and facilitate art, like how you like what you're willing to commit, and also like respecting not only your own but other people's boundaries, and understanding that, and understanding how people make work. Like, I think those are the people that I personally really connect with, that I can like tell, and you could just sort of like take a grasp on what's going on. Just being somebody who spends a lot of their own time making music, I find I connect with people who are doing similar things to what I do. Um, Not saying I do them as well as they do, but that's just sort of like when you know your own pursuit, it's cooler to, yeah, be a fan of things that can really help influence what you're doing, and sort of feed you and give you energy to yeah, make more stuff.
You just,
Not
I'm
exclusively.
no, I'm just thinking about what you said. Um, Something that I would say, because I'm just like, I'm, I'm getting a vibe that we should put this into practice, and you are going to play a couple of tunes for us. If you were still not to really jolt you from one thing to another, but I feel like the tone of our discussion is like providing a good jumping off point for that. But also, I will say, like, I did a show, and like circling back to, let's can we just circle back to this initiative, this pivot in these unprecedented times that we've made. Um, Taco Pico, we just lost a valued, important venue in the city where, I mean, you know, anybody could play there. I played my first ever solo show, like proper there, and I played my first ever. Like, he let me and my friend Jeff like set up our turntables. We had a wicked like DJ night with turntables, and like we brought in a PA. It was my first time ever doing that. But I think times were tough. They've been open a long time. The restaurant industry is tough because, as people say, you're exciting for a couple of years, and then after that, like the average lifespan of a restaurant is like 10 years or something. If you can even make it that long, it's like you're doing well. Uh, just people, there's always a newer, more exciting option than you after your kind of initial run. Um, but regardless, um, really kind of important venue for bands that are at this level of like, you're not selling 150 tickets because it's like, I don't know what the capacity of that place would be though, but like 50 or 60. But anyhow, they there's an online kind of farewell goodbye concert tonight,
Yeah, I
and
tuned in.
oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I played, and I was recording my own thing, and I had like my stuff set up with my electric guitar and my looper and my drum machine because I was like, I want to like make it exciting and interesting, and should have been simple enough. So I thought they decided to pre-record that live stream. I'm gonna shoot video on my phone, record audio on my computer, then I'll just match them up in iMovie. Should be simple. Except my phone keeps shutting off after like 3 minutes. I tried the first song 3 times, didn't get a complete take. And it's like, the first take was the one. And then you discover that it shut. I think, now this one is my own fault. I think that I didn't hit record on my computer for the audio. I recorded the video, but not the audio. And you're like, really, I have to do that again now.
Yeah.
And I have to, like, all of the excitement and emotion in the moment was just like, it's just gone, didn't count. I gotta like try and recreate that. And then it feels weird. And plus, I'm like singing to my cell phone on a stand. It feels totally artificial, and all these things of playing a normal show that all you need is an audience and you are not present. So you got to kind of recreate. And it was interesting seeing how people dealt with that. Everybody kind of addressed it in their own way and set up their own situation. But in my case, I just was lucky that we had some friends over, and really they just were coming over to hang out. But they're both photographers, and so I came up, and they're like, "How's your thing going?" And I was like, "Oh, it's terrible." I was like, "My gear is not working." And they're like, "Why don't you just do it out here? We'll shoot you." And I was like, "Really?" They're like, "Oh yeah." And then I just grabbed the acoustic guitar, so now I have none of the technical problems. And one camera, one iPhone. I took my little Zoom recorder. It still wound up being techie, and somebody's laptop died, and he had to go into his office to get the charger at like 11 p.m. But we got the thing done, and it wound up being so much better because of the involvement of these other people who have the skills. If it had just been me, I did my best to frame it in an interesting way, and I can do my best to deliver the best thing that I can, but still, it's just me.
Yeah.
And we're limited by what I think is an interesting shot with my phone. But because these guys were here, I got two. One of the cameras was stationary, and one was moving around, and they're like cutting between different shots. Like I wouldn't have come up with that, as
Yeah.
evidenced by the fact that I didn't come up with it.
Yeah, no, but that's one of the amazing things about collaboration, and that you can feed off of other people's skill sets.
Yeah,
So
and it
yeah,
can take you
no,
to a place that you didn't even know was possible, or like would never have thought of.
yeah, and sometimes too, you just like don't allow yourself to get there because you sort of you say it's. I find sometimes I need somebody to convince me to do something, even with the own things I make, because I'm sort of like, oh, that's not for me. In in a strange way, like I'll shout out an idea before I even try it. Not that doesn't relate necessarily to your situation. I'm just saying like that's one of the nice things about collaboration. Sometimes when there's a person in front of you who presents an idea, like I will, in that instance, I'll always be like, yeah, let's try it. Why not? But sometimes when I come up with an idea, it's like instead of giving myself the same shot, I'll be like, isn't it working already? Like what? Like like
Yeah,
what am I trying to solve?
you reject it. And it's like, well, it's funny. Like, so for instance, because I can remember myself as a frustrated young wannabe songwriter, and just like you're sitting there waiting for that bolt of inspiration, it doesn't come. You're like, oh, I'm a failure. What do I do? And then I'll like write down lyrics, and because I didn't like, because I don't know, because they didn't make me feel a certain way after I wrote them or something, I'd be like, well, they're obviously not good enough. And
Hmm.
when I did that like song a day demo project, I just like didn't have a tune every day, and I had all these unreleased scraps of things, so I wound up putting some out and stuff that in the past I've been like, no, it's not good enough. Listen to me like, actually, it's fine. But
Yeah.
most recently, the song that did that, I had a great idea for a TikTok video that I'm gonna spoil here because I just haven't gotten around to it. I don't know if Jane was listening to the radio or like was listening to something, but anyway, it was Adele, like "Rolling in the Deep" was on the radio. I started singing the lyrics to "What I Got" by Sublime over top of it,
Nice.
and yeah, I thought it was great. But that is a song that if I had written, I would have just like crumpled it up and tossed it away. Early in the morning, rise into the street, light me up that cigarette, and I'll strap shoes on my feet. Got to find a reason things went wrong. Got to find a reason why my money's all gone. I got a Dalmatian. I can still get high. I can play the guitar like a motherfucking riot. Like, there's
Wah, wah,
no
wah, wah,
way.
wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, there is no way I would have like
Yeah.
looked at that. I would be like, no one can ever see this.
Totally.
And there's
Um,
so many songs like that.
yeah. Well, yeah. So I've been trying to uh, finish up the record I'm working on, and I've like as of late, the only thing that will get me, because I have songs that are instrumentally like probably 85% done, and I know what I want to talk about with the songs, but I just can't, like, I don't like sit down at the kitchen table and I'm like reheating leftovers and then I'm just like, oh no, 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 it hit me. It's time to write the lyrics to the song. I'm inspired. Like it doesn't happen like that. And in the past I've written songs because I think I was just like I've been sort of like
Whoa, you froze. Uh-oh. Our guest is
yep.
frozen, folks. Oh, hey. Jason Ogden says, I would need 138 mobs to sell 150 tickets, which I love. Sorry, are you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Yo.
Yo. James Brown also says, if mom was as good at selling tickets to my show as she is at selling my elementary school fundraiser chocolate bars at her work, oh, come on. I ate those chocolate bars myself and then had to pay for them myself. Anyhow,
I I just I just came back in and just heard chocolate bars myself.
yeah. If mom was as good at selling
Sorry.
tickets to my show, as
No, I just got cut off. Sorry.
oh, please keep interrupting me while you check your phone.
I will.
The audience loves it.
No,
If
I fell off for a bit there. So
yeah, we noticed. I just giving you the business. James Brown says, if mom was as good at selling tickets to my show as she is at selling my elementary school's fundraiser chocolate bars at her work, then I would have been crowned the school's bestseller and won the basketball net by now. My mom has never sold a chocolate bar for me. I'm sorry for saying that, Mom. Well, it's nice that you came clean, sir. The internet appreciates it. Yeah, I would just those like world's finest chocolate and almond bars. I would like have the thing in my room, and I would like eat one, then eat another. Then at the end of a week, like I owe this thing because they're like $2 a pop. I don't know. Like I owe this fourteen
yeah,
dollars or whatever.
yeah. I think my experience with those is pretty much the same.
How about magazine subscriptions? You have any luck with those?
Oh no, no. But there's a running joke with my friends who like we went to elementary school together, and one year when the I don't know if you guys would have assemblies talking about these things, and they would show all the prizes that people could win if they sold X amount of things, or they'd be put into a draw. And the teacher who was presenting that, after every single item, he looked at the crowd and he just went, "Ooh." So that was a running joke for us, like to this day, like literally just like a brand new Slinky. Ooh.
And was the idea that like he thought that you would be excited, or he's just like playing it up? So he's like, we need these
I,
kids to want these things, so they sell this stuff,
I think he was just trying to be a performer.
right?
You know, he was
Just
like, it's my time.
laying it on nice and thick.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Uh, in the mirror the night before. And this is what I'm going to do, hon.
Yeah.
A brand new bike. And wait for it. Ooh.
Ooh. You know what I saw? I was gonna say the other day,
I'm
but I
still
didn't
I'm
see.
still talking about that. I'm still talking about it. So he clearly it worked.
It worked. Yeah, I was gonna say the other day, but it wasn't the other day at all. But this was like it seemed to me to be clearly a prize because it was a Jeep bike. like a Jeep brand
Ooh.
bicycle. Yeah, it's like nobody's ever bought one of those. You only win that in a contest.
Same as a
friend of
Tim
mine has
Hortons
it.
bike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it had pretty serious shots. I mean, it's probably a good bike.
Yeah.
Anyhow, what do you think? You want to play the tune?
Yeah, I'll play a tune. Let's just take a I'll just get a top up of my drink so that I'm not so parched. I've been talking for an hour and a half,
I
and I'll
know that
switch it over my.
it's something that I noticed listening to the replay of last week's episode. It's just that like I had to make sure I'm hydrated, and I still don't think I did a great job because you get the like in the mic, like
Yeah,
those things that you do just because like your mouth is dry.
100%. Yeah, I'll play a
Drink
tune.
more beer. That's what you do
Oh, I'm off the beer.
if
It's
you're
whiskey
cool.
waters.
Whiskey water.
Yeah.
All right. Do we do a countdown or do we do a? We're taking a break, folks. You know what I'm
I
gonna
mean,
do? I'm gonna
I
put
need I. Yeah.
I'm gonna put the theme song on a loop.
Cool. Yeah. I should be good in 2 minutes.
All right, bathroom break for the audience. We'll be right back. Oh, hang on now. And we are back, folks. Look at this. Have you seen?
It's a real guitar.
Have you seen a better rock stick all day? Be honest. What kind of real guitar is that? The people want to know.
It's a Godin, but it's this line they make called Richmond, or it's Richmond. Yeah.
Oh, I remember seeing a Richmond guitar at Long and McQuaid in Halifax and thinking it was like a cool, like kind of retro one like that. And I also think like I needed to buy it because it's called Richmond.
Yeah. I got it.
And I come from Richmond, Prince Edward Island. As to you.
I do. That's our origin story.
Yeah, that's right. The Genesis. All right, what do you got for us, my friend?
Yeah, I'm gonna start it off. I'll do this one. It's called Swell.
Love it.
Yeah.
And these are from. Sorry to keep. This is the worst actually. Like having somebody bogarting your show while you're trying to introduce yourself. I'm gonna shut up. But the one question I was gonna say, these are off of your upcoming release.
Yeah, upcoming record. I've been working on it for a minute. It's so Ryan played drums on four of the songs, I believe. So 5, maybe 4. Anyways, new record coming out. Probably won't be released until almost the winter. It's just getting sent off for mixing next month. But it's just a record about being a young guy in society, and just sort of coming to terms with what it actually is to like live as an adult, I guess. So it's a lot of songs that sort of come from moving to Montreal and stuff like this. So this song Swell is about it's sort of about, in a big way, like just realizing that you can't escape capitalism, but also like acknowledging that I have a certain amount of privilege because I'm educated and I've got some skills, and I have a pretty easy life. But at the same time, selling your time sort of sucks.
Well, and you're right. You can't escape it because at the end of the day, you may decide to opt out, but unless you're going to grow your own food and make your own clothing and like not really interact with society, like you have no choice.
Yeah, totally. No,
Yep.
like we live in it. I'm not so pessimistic to think it's like impossible.
Well, I think like even people who think it's great would still say that.
Yeah.
Or like you do have a choice,
So
but it's to go
I think
off the grid.
Yeah. So yeah. Can you hear that guitar?
Loud and clear.
Oh baby. Yeah. So this song is just sort of about that, and just realizing that this is the rest of my life. I just got to deal with it.
All right, I'm gonna get out of here. Take it away, my friend.
I just feel like shit. I can't help that, so I'm clocking now. Cause if I can't compete, then baby, I'm not a thing. Ain't got no backup plans for this gig life. And taking debt scares me more than dropping out mine. I just can't talk about it without swelling up and sounding like an asshole. Well, here I go. mind be dissatisfied? Would I rather fail than try? It's about that part you catch me in my life. I just can't talk about it without swelling up and sounding like an asshole. I just can't talk about it without swelling up and sounding like an asshole. Well, here I go. Who am I to be dissatisfied? Would I rather fail than try? It's about that part you catch me in my life. Who am I to be dissatisfied? Who am I to be dissatisfied? Who am I to be dissatisfied?
Woo! I know it can be weird to like not have an audience. That was great. What was that called?
Hey, thanks. Yeah, that one's called Swell. So that's the second song on the record.
Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about that song?
Yeah, just sort of what I went over. I remember when I first like was
That's all about it.
but when I first was like starting to work after having finished school, I felt like life was sort of this constant audition, and you're like trying to sell yourself to be like, give me a job and let me have some kind of stability in my life. And yeah, so it just like, I think I'm a really privileged person, and I definitely don't have a particularly hard life in any given way, but if I don't acknowledge that it stresses me out, I think I don't think that's productive either.
It also doesn't mean it's easy. Like, I think the thing that all of us can recognize, it's like, you may not have a hard life, but it doesn't mean it's easy. There are like people whose situation is worse, definitely. There are also people whose situation is better, definitely. I don't have a hard life particularly either. Things are better right now than they've been in a long time, but it doesn't mean it's easy all the time, because how you process things and experience the world emotionally is not necessarily based on what is going on immediately outside of you. You know what I mean? It's like, otherwise, like, everyone who lives in California would be happy all the time, for instance, just because it's always sunny.
Totally.
Anyhow,
yeah,
I'm gonna shut my gabber. You got some more for us?
yeah, I'll do one more. This one is a little bit retooled for this sort of setting.
Love it.
But it's called Great Success.
Yep.
And so 1 second, I'm just gonna pull up.
Absolutely.
Just gonna pull up a little something. And just tune up. I don't have a real tight rig here, but great success. Yeah, it was a song that I wrote. So it was sort of this period of my. So as I was saying earlier, I was playing in this band Fog Lake, and I was going on tour and having a blast and like playing to good audiences as just a guitar player in a band, and I was getting some gigs working as an assistant at a big reputable studio here, and sort of my mentor was trying to hand me off some work, and ultimately like the session that he wanted me to take over was just like really hectic, and like the client I didn't really like on a human level. So but at the same time, like it's a beautiful studio, and they have a Neve console that Led Zeppelin used to own, and like I would have gotten to do so much cool stuff and like engineer for session musicians and all this stuff. And ultimately, the guy who was having the sessions didn't really want me to take over as engineer, because I was just like, I wasn't, they had reached a point of nonverbal communication in the studio. So there's no way that me coming in and working as assistant for a week could have been as good as the guy I was taking over for, who had worked on this project for like 6 months. And because this is like, you know, there's only a limited number of people in this space, I'm pretty fine in saying that like, I don't know where this guy got the money to rent at the studio and do this, but it would not surprise me if it was money he was trying to burn from illicit means.
Illicit means. That's the phrase that was in my head too. Yep.
So anyways, it was just like a weird scenario. But when like I didn't get this, and I had sort of put my other work on hold to like go and assist for a week and try to take it over. I remember afterwards, I was just like sort of floored, because I was like, oh, I just wanted to be a recording engineer, and like, this is my shot, and I missed it. But I think what that ended up leading to is that, like, at that time in my life, I was really fortunate to piece together a full income from like working in and around media. And so I was making guitar pedals, I was working for a big YouTube channel, and working freelance audio. And it was cool, but I sort of realized at some point that my main source of income and like my pursuit of making and facilitating art, it might be healthier in some instances to separate them, because I found I was really like emotionally gassed when I was working in that sort of sphere. And it's sort of, it was really tough to then finish up a day of doing that and just sort of then try to like go and work on records with
and be
people
excited about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Great Success, which I'll try to play for you guys in my, but it's sort
I think
of
you'll have
about,
great success with this song.
Hey, thank you. But it's just about like, it's just about this period of my life, and just sort of coming full circle on it, of being like, when you play music, everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people's initial reaction is to be like, oh, so you want to be a rock star.
Yeah, what do you like Bono?
Yeah, and it's like that's not really what I want to do. It's just something I really like, and I'm willing to dump a bunch of time into. So if I could do it all the time, that'd be cool. But also too, just separating like this instance of success that people would try to project on you, and yeah, just like thinking about like what success would actually mean, and on like as far as like a personal satisfaction level. So trying to separate external indicators of success with what I deem to be like my wins in music. So yeah, it's just about being a young gun trying to find your way, you know?
Cool. I love it.
All right.
Built a new understanding of service, was still respecting my own needs. I glance at the steeples on my walk home and toy with the idea of becoming pious. I told you I remember the day my dreams died. Shock on my bed, the first panic attack of my life. Gave myself the night to think of why I'd even try. I want a new vocation. I I need to be alone. I want a new vocation. I need to be alone. 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 I'm giving up on great success. I wanna give you what I can. I just wanna feel that I try to be honest. I'm giving up on great success. I wanna give you what I can. I just wanna feel that I try to be honest. There's a piece of me that left, and that's probably for the best. 'Cause when I try to reason, I find my reasons. To me, that dream was something that I just lust for and regret. When I can't live up to some shit I made up in my head. So I wanna build this skill set. I don't wanna work alone. And I wanna share this moment. And I want you to feel whole. 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 I'm giving up on great success. I wanna give you what I can. I just wanna feel that I try to be honest. I'm giving up on great success. I wanna give you what I can. I just wanna feel that I try to be honest. I'm giving up on great success, and I'm quite alright with that.
So good, man.
Hey, thank you.
I will gladly be the screaming audience. Woo!
Thanks so much.
Yeah, really. It's interesting too, knowing what went into it, because as you mentioned, I did play on a recording of that, and I've heard the song. I've listened to it. I've caught some of the lyrics, but it's a funny thing where you might think it's painfully obvious when playing, but unless someone knows the specific details of what you're talking about, they just have no idea, and it's like it sounds like a mood.
Totally.
And then the other thing is, even if somebody does know what went into it, it's still then it becomes a game of following the thread, because still like the way that one person's mind works is not the way that another person's mind works. So it's still you're still kind of like navigating like thoughts and metaphors, and it's like in like melody and chords and rhythm as well, but like I feel this at this time, it's like I feel like that is unique too.
Yeah. And one thing that I sort of battle with a little bit is how much do you spell out and how much do you just enjoy words that make sense to you and sound good together.
I always worry I'm giving too much away.
Yeah, I think it's I don't think it's irresponsible. Like I think some people can spell it out and it's really good. But there's like parts in that song where I say things and it's like it's like it has value to the listener on a surface level, but it also has like something more to me because of a specific scenario. So for example, at the start of the song, I talk about walking home and looking at steeples and toying with the idea of becoming pious. And it's sort of based off of this conversation that I had with a friend who is talking about how they're studying, like they're taking our history course, and there was like, I forget if it was a monk or a priest, but in like the 16 or 1700s, who was an amazing art historian, and basically they were allowed to be that because they were taken care of by their by the like religious institution they were part of. So it was sort of this inside joke to me of being like, well, if I want to be if I want to be an artist, maybe the easiest way to do that is just to like find some way to be pious, and then get somebody to take care of me so that I can then pursue, so that then it can be like, oh, it worked for that guy.
You're talking about having a patron, essentially.
Yeah.
Because like even
exactly.
the classical composers, right? That's how they lived, is they would like perform for rich people who could pay them.
Yeah.
But what's funny about that is that it's so specific, but it also is something that is personal.
Yeah.
Like a topic that is something that every person approaches from their own personal place. And so I think like certain kinds of images, even certain words, I think will just send a listener like to like, because then you're off in whatever that stuff means to you.
Totally. Yeah. And I really like throwing in the word pious because
Yeah.
I feel like it has so much behind it for
I thought you were going to say it was like a reference to like St. Pius Hall in Charlottetown.
Oh yeah, no, that would be cool though. I've definitely gone to some formative DIY shows, all ages shows there.
Glory, Man United played our first show there.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, it's
Or we weren't called that then. We were Adam Warren and DDT. Did you just step on a pedal?
No, I stepped on my mic stand.
Oh, okay. There's like a buzz. You're getting some comments. We got a great tone and vocals. That creepy old shirtless man in the window staring behind him is kind of freaking me out, though.
Oh, really? Who's that? I can't see him.
Oh, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if that was an attempt to like freak you out, so I didn't. I saved it. I'm a little great playing and singing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm a little too high off the ground for anyone to see right in. We're on the second floor.
Right. Somebody would have to like scale the wall,
or be a really tall man.
Right.
Which, if you're tall enough that your torso.
Yeah, that is worth freaking out.
And you're shirtless? 100%.
That merits a freak.
100%. Yeah. No, it's that song too. It's funny. That was the one that ended up getting cut up a bunch on the record, because I had somebody who helped me just restructure the arrangement on a couple tracks, and we actually like completely just cut up some things. My friend Eric, who plays in that band Foxing, who we opened up for, I reached out to him when this whole pandemic thing happened, and he played a touring band, so he basically lost all of his income immediately.
Because those bands are making nothing from streaming, so it's all touring.
100%. Yeah. So he sort of posted on Instagram, was like, "Hey, I'm, I've done these things in the past," and he co-produced their last record, and I would just hit him up and I was like, "Hey, man, hope you're doing okay. I'd love to put a little money in your pocket because I'm still working, and get some help with this song." So we really cut it up a bit. And that was interesting. That was a cool moment of like, oh yeah, I never would have tweaked it that much, but he really made me reevaluate it. The lyrics, like nothing changed in the content, but just the way it's laid out a little bit.
Cool. Do you have another one in you? I bet you do.
Yeah, sure. I'll do this
Yeah.
one. I get a tune, but this one's a little bit more depressing. So sort of like pretty much everyone, you might hear this story. Oh no, it's muted. This is good. Okay. So this song is tentatively titled "Suffering," which is a real indicator of its mood. But
Thanks, Micah.
so yeah, no problem.
It's you know what I'm proud of us for. Speaking of, I was gonna say like it actually is apt. Like people are going through crazy shit right now, but we have made it this far in the episode without explicitly discussing COVID-19.
Oh yeah,
that is not entered into how we've been. I think we made reference to like stuff being shut down at the moment, but good for us.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend the other day, and you know how there's always these like corny year in review things on like New Year's Eve.
Yep.
I'm just waiting for this year when it's just like #stay home, COVID-19 rock the world.
I know. I saw a tweet from Jonathan Torrens yesterday. He's like, I just saw someone use the words unprecedented and pivot together as a phrase, and it was peak 2020.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, living here, I bet to the rest of the country, it seems particularly grim. And it bums me out how some people don't take it seriously because that's like really visible. But I don't know. I think there's still like a lot of humanity and life, and people are still trying to just be reasonable, and there are a lot of people who are like trying to make the most, but I mean it's really the most vulnerable people in our society who are being hit the hardest. And once again, going back to that other song I had earlier, it's like, all things considered, my life is pretty okay given how bad this is, and that's just a sign of my privilege. So I need to.
I know. I just have to like stay home and like that's it.
Totally. So I mean, yeah, things definitely aren't great here. But another thing that I think I really hope we can have very honest and factual and thought out conversations about these things, because I think too there's also like a weird amount of like judgment from so here it's like stay inside, stay home, be reasonable, all these things. But also too, like a lot of people will like really shame people for just like trying to have some sense of normalcy and humanity. I think there's it's just to say that like I think we really need to get to what is actually causing this and have very frank conversations around that.
And it's also like
being overly paranoid.
Conversations, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I must interject. It is also like, I'm not a scientist. Are you a scientist? Are most people scientists? do most people actually understand the situation, or is it varying degrees of like, I don't care, I can do whatever I want, the government can't tell me to stay home, or like, you guys are being paranoid or overblown, or like, this is insane, this is going to kill us all if we don't be careful, like, this is serious, I can't believe you're not taking it seriously. But none of that stuff has anything to do with virology or like the actual mechanics of how an infectious disease gets passed from person to person. And I think it's because of such widespread ignorance. I'm certainly ignorant. I was so freaked out. I remember going to the grocery store and being like, people are like walking by each other in the aisles. I'm like keeping my distance from everybody. I did thing like the maybe I had a 50% off item and it wasn't scanning at the self-serve thing, and then the person working the store just comes up to me and is like right in my face, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll just scan it here." You're like, "Okay, cool that you'll scan it, but you realize we're not supposed to be this close to each other, right?"
Yeah.
That was me, and then my wife is a pharmacist, so she just understands it. And she's like, yeah, you need to be careful in these ways, but like you're okay. You're doing the right things, and it's like you don't have to worry.
Yeah. And two, like if you get it, um it's it's it might happen and you might be in that scenario, but doing things that aren't going to prevent it from happening and pretending like they will isn't going to change the situation.
What are
And
you
like,
referring
yeah.
to? What are the things that
Oh,
aren't going to prevent it from happening?
oh, I just mean like I'm sort of seeing what I'm seeing sort of the same things that you're talking about, and that particularly here, like some people will really shame people for like going out for like just like being outside unnecessarily. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like you can't stay in your house uh for like for
No,
I mean, you can stay in your house for 3 months straight, but at the end of the day it's actually not going to hurt anybody to go and walk down the street or sit in a park if you're not around anyone and you're just in a grass field.
that's it exactly.
So
And especially if you're going back to your own home, like
yeah.
it's different if. And like it is all of society. If people are like, you realize how much interaction and how much stuff could just be floating in the air. Because just
Mm.
things like, I was joking the other night. I was saying, like, what can we do this weekend? And like, oh, I used to have a life.
Yeah, right, right.
Like, I would go to Pickeroons and then they close at 11, then you go to Port City Royal after. And there's just like, it's not like it's unsanitary by any stretch, like the tables get wiped down, the glasses get cleaned, but that's it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's enough to keep us healthy until it's not. Because like one infected person could infect a glass that infects a tap that infects everyone else. And so it's crazy. And the craziest thing about this too is like the fact that you don't know when it's there, you only know when it was there like 5 days later, and by that point it's spread.
Yeah, yeah. The
But
the contagious and asymptomatic period is like what's totally bananas about. Yeah.
yeah. But it is, I really, really also believe too that a lot of it and like on what I'll call both sides is like driven by people who are genuinely concerned and afraid for
Mhm.
completely valid emotional reasons, but maybe not scientific reasons.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I will say,
And
like there are both like people who are like, you should like be like, don't ever look at another person again because COVID, like that's irrational, just as much as it, like I'm not staying home because it's not going to get me, or I don't care. I don't care because I'm probably healthy, or I think it's overblown, or I think the government is trying to keep us down. Like that also is not based on
yeah.
science.
No, completely. Yeah, so I mean, and nobody really knows how this will play out exactly. Like there's projections, but
I think that, sort of
Unprecedented.
fuels. Yeah, it's very unprecedented. But I don't know. I think everybody should still be very cautious and be diligent. But I also think, just like, if the more and more we discuss the mechanisms of transmission and talk about that in very frank ways, for me, it gives me more peace of mind.
Is that just because you
Because
understand it better, or you feel like everybody just needs to be on the same page?
just because for me, I understand it better. But I think it just, if everybody, for me, it's just like, it removes some overlooming paranoia around just like existing right now.
Fair enough. All right, those are heavy words. I think we ought to get to some music, if you're cool with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've made people wait, and I think those are some heavy words to bring us into.
Yeah, so this one, Suffering. Had sort of I don't want to say too grim of a year before it, but it's just about coming to terms with an adult that suffering is a part of life, and we all are going to have to deal with it. And however you choose to respond to it, you shouldn't burden yourself with more guilt. It's hard to deal with human suffering. All right.
Suffering is part of our condition. When I was younger and became despondent, I thought, really, I thought, can I mend this my suffering? Is a burden, but I live it. So I've got to limit my time with my demon, but I still trip up until I've had enough. I bet it feels so good to hate my guts. I feel so stressed, and I just wanna be stoned. So I'll cut you out, and I'll run my mouth. So I'll cut you out, and I'll run my mouth. I know it feels so good to get worked up, and I feel so stressed. I just need an outlet, but I won't give you my time or attention no more.
Woo!
Thanks.
All right, what do you think? Oh, right, microphone. What do you think? Is it time? Have we reached that point in the episode?
It could be.
We're now approaching 2.5 hours in.
Hey, it's been a good 2.5 hours.
I agree.
Flew by.
Yeah, I agree. Would you like to play us out, sir?
Oh,
I'm hitting you up for all kinds of songs now. You can say no.
would I like to play you out, huh?
Well,
let me take one quick second and think about it. Yeah. So I'll do one more track. This one I'll play because I think it. I didn't really prepare this that much, but I'll play one more. This is not on the new record.
Oh, I got a request. Hang on now before we sign off here. I got a couple of content requests here. Talk a bit more about you guys growing up together. That's an entire episode we don't have time for. Our age difference are we 10 years apart? I think we are. So I think Steve and I are 7.
Cool 10.
A cool decade. All right. And what is each of our favorite breakfasts?
Ooh.
Mine
I
is
like a
food.
classic. I like a classic English breakfast. Little tomato on the side.
Oh wow, snazzy! You heard it here first, folks. My only real rule really is like it's got to be savory. I can't really do sweet breakfast. Once, maybe like I'm gonna say up to 3 times a year, but no more than that.
Yeah.
So
I respect it.
Respect. All right, Micah Brown, thank you so much for being here.
No problem.
My brother, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks to everyone tuning in. Thanks to everyone watching this in the future. Thank you. Thank you for you. You just do you, you know? Totally. I actually truly believe that, but you know.
Me too.
All right, so what's this one called?
This one's called Drink and Scrape.
Drink and Scrape. Love it. This is a throwback.
This is a throwback.
I love it. This is when you get the deep cuts. This is what I was going to say about doing when you were talking about writing earlier, when you're like, I can't just sit down and get the inspiration, then I got to go write this down. Me either. I got to warm up, and then it's then you get the juices rolling.
Totally.
So just in the sense of you wouldn't have played this song if I didn't make you play for, but I went looking for it. And we get treated to a deep cut.
Yeah, a deep cut. Well, this is a hit.
Just a throwback
for the Newfoundlanders.
Yeah,
people would go off to this song. Yeah, this one, the name comes from when I was moving out of a bedroom, and I had put all of this acoustic treatment on the walls with a really sticky adhesive, and I just got drunk and scraped it off out of frustration. But it's sort of about a period of my life where I was living in I was in this house that had a studio in it, so I was trying to keep it on and grab the lease. But in the interim, it was a bunch of rooms that the landlord just rented out to students. And while it was being transferred, in a 3-month period, he decided to rent some rooms out to a couple middle-aged men who had just freshly gotten out of prison, and were still serving weekends. And he didn't let me know. So I came back from visiting our parents, and then my two new roommates were like ex-cons, and he didn't like tell me this, and they were just like shitty dudes.
That is so
mean,
weird.
like, yeah, and it's not. This isn't like, I'm not trying to like say that people are irredeemable or anything like that, or like that going to prison makes you a bad person. It's really just like, I was sort of like, this is where I lived and I didn't have any choice over it. But I guess sort of.
No, of
I put
course. It's
myself
like
in
it's
that
weird when any
position.
new person moves in.
Yeah, totally.
Let alone
But
like this is my situation now. Yeah.
yeah,
I think people get it.
just-
I don't think you know. You're not saying that everyone who goes to jail is a bad person. We know that's not true.
No, yeah. So just like anecdotally, I remember one time I came down to the kitchen and yeah, this guy had just like wigged me out because when I was gone, he had gone into my bedroom and smoked cigarettes and then left them in a pint glass. So I was like, who's smoking in my bedroom? But I had pet rats that a friend was coming to feed, and he was just like, oh, I just want to hang out with the rats. And it's just like, why are you in my bedroom smoking cigarettes and drinking beer? So anyways, then the next morning I go down to the kitchen and he rolls in and he's like, man, have you ever heard of this stuff called angel dust? The guys down at the pen were talking about it. I really want to try it. And I was just like, I don't know, man.
That is crazy, man.
Yeah, so that's sort of where I was at when I wrote this song. You might pick it up from the lyrics. It's called Drinking Straight. Thanks for having me, Ryan, on HITMAKERS.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Likewise, I do too. Get out of here.
Well, the drugs you do, they won't give you sight to pieces of yourself you can't find otherwise. No, they'll just fuck you up. But take these pills to do us well. Can I go to heaven? Cause my roommate is the devil, and my home is now my hell. Oh, now I'm living with the devil, and he's burning down the house. Drawing on my posters, cause I'm moving the fall. Oh God, just give me one last chance to fall down the stairs. I'll keep on rolling till it feels right. Yeah, I could end up anywhere. 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 And now I'm living with the devil, and he's burning down the house. Turning on my posters, cause I'm moving the floor. Oh God, just give me one last chance to fall down the stairs. I'll keep on rolling till it feels right. Yeah, I could end up anywhere. Yeah, I could end up anywhere. Yeah, I could end up anywhere. ends up anywhere.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's just me. Until next time, same time, same place. Hitmakers, After Dark.
Sorry, I said a whole thing. I don't know if you could hear me. I was like, thanks everyone for tuning in. Yes, same time, same place. Thanks so much to Micah for being here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I was too busy queuing up the outro. So here we go. Till next time.